Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Um, Things are winding down real quickly here. Um, this might be our last lecture. I may have one for sure. We're not going to have one on Thursday. I'll be grading your test, and so that's what happened last week. And then we will have a final exam next week. I think I had mentioned to you that we'd probably have it again Wednesday by midnight and do Thursday by midnight. And that way I can turn in grades by Friday. One of the things that I'm going to make different about these last two tests is that the test that you're going to get tomorrow is going to have an answer sheet with it. I noticed some of you were having trouble sending multiple pages and you had to split it up. And so this might make it a little simpler on you to have an answer sheet, and you can just make a copy of that and send that by itself, and that would be fine with me. Um, and the final exam will be the same way. The final exam is obviously going to be from the whole semester, all the things that we've been covering in the third 9 weeks, and plus all the time that we've been out this fourth 9 weeks, all the things we've been covering there. I can't tell you exactly how the test is going to be, the final exam. My thinking is it's going to be a combination, not just all fill in the blank, but some multiple choice and some true false. There will be some figures on there, drawings, things that you um, have to fill in, and it will probably be close to 100 questions or so. It may be more than 100, but it's going to be probably 100 or so questions. And again, it's an opportunity for you to make a real good grade because you can look things up in the book, you can look things up in your notes, you can look things up in handouts. Um, there may be on the final exam an essay question, not multiple pages, but maybe just a paragraph or half a page or maybe a full page. I'm not sure. I haven't made it out. I'm just throwing things out there that are possibilities so you won't be completely in the dark about what's going on. Here again, pass the word that folks need to listen to this, whether they listen to it tonight or not. Um, that's up to y'all. I mean, I get some things good out of it. If you have any questions, again, coming up on Wednesday, Wednesday evening by midnight, I'll get the test to you, and then you can turn it in by midnight on Thursday. Now, I understand there are a few that have some internet issues. I don't know what to say about that. I could probably, if you will contact me somehow, I can get you a copy to the school on Thursday morning, a paper copy. I think things have relaxed a little bit at the school, and I can do that if that will help you. But you have to let me know if that's the case. And I could actually have a folder with several tests there. But you need to let me know something so that I can do that. I don't mind doing that at all. I can do that Thursday morning. That's the best I can do. I'm not going to do it at midnight on Wednesday. Just not going to go down there at that time. Probably get pulled over by the police. They'll come up and check on me or something. So I'm guessing Thursday morning is the best I can do. So if you send me an email with that request, I don't mind doing that at all. Now, as far as the test coming up this Wednesday, it will be over the handout, Ecology Biotic, Spring 2020. And you need to have all the blanks filled in. You need to know what all the terms there mean. And even if you don't, remember, you can look these up. The only thing I ask that you not do is you not look up the answer to a question on the internet. But you can use your book, You can use your notes. You can use this handout. I also ask that you not um, ask a friend the answer to a question. Now, I hope that you are abiding by those two simple things. That's not a complicated thing. If you're not, then that's on you, and I just hope you are. All right. So a couple of things just to make sure that we understand each other. This is going to be dealing with populations a lot and characteristics of populations, and you're going to have some figures. Now, again, one of the things I ask you to do is to have this handout and number the pages on the handout. If you don't have it in front of you, it'd be a good thing to get it and put it in front of you if you can. But you are going to have to, on page 3, be able to identify what's going on in the figure there. This is a very, 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 in fact, this is the most common population figure showing population growth. We don't normally, or I don't normally use the terms transition phase or plateau phase. In the plateau phase, I like to use the term carrying capacity. Carrying capacity, and that's mentioned just above that figure. At what point would we say that the population is at carrying capacity? And that would be point 3, there where it levels off at the top. And then looking at this, where is the greatest growth, the greatest increase in the rate of growth is in what we call the exponential phase. And that's where if you have a growth increase in 1 year of 10 individuals, and the next year it's 15 individuals, the next year it's 20 individuals, the next year it's 30 individuals, you see the rate of growth is beginning to increase. Okay, from 5 each year to now 10 each year, and then from 30 to 50, now it's 20 to increase 20. So that's an increase in the rate of growth, and that's exponential growth. When it's experiencing exponential growth, the population has very few things that are limiting its growth. Birth rate is good. Death rate is low enough so that it's not limiting the population. There's plenty of food. In the case of animals, food, water, shelter. In the case of plants, there's plenty of minerals and light and water. Those things are not limiting the population in the exponential area of the growth. When those things become limiting, then the population growth begins to go into that transition phase. It begins to show that curve, and then it levels off. Now, anything that happens to an ecosystem, such as prolonged drought or earthquake, any change in the weather, anything that man does, like a clear cut in a forest or a fire that man has caused or that lightning has caused, those kind of things can change an ecosystem, and that will change the carrying capacity for a particular animal or plant. Now, we mostly think of this in terms of animals, and animals have certain requirements, certain things they like, and they will go to those areas where they have those things that they like. That gets into the distribution. Remember, that's the very last thing that's covered in the handout. And animals tend to go toward, and plants too, tend to be in those places where most of their needs are being met. And where, like if it's a desert, a watering hole is going to have a whole lot more animals coming to that area than a place that doesn't have a watering hole. And so that's clumped. Okay. So anytime you have a distribution of animals or plants, even, clumped is the most common that you see. On certain plants, like in desert plants, you might see uniform. Like when seeds are dispersed, we talked about this last week, you might see random distribution, but very quickly the distribution begins to center around those places, animals or plants, where their needs are going to be met. Human population is not, as far as we know right now, leveling off, and it's kind of difficult to see all of those numbers Folks just about have to just guess about those. But as far as we know right now, they're not leveling off. And if they did, it would be because of some factors that are doing that. Disease, for example, like we're experiencing now with the virus, has, and this disease is not going to be significant enough to cause our population to begin to level off. Don't worry about that. But something like that, and by the way, disease is what we call a population dependent. Look at the words there, population dependent. That is a term that's on the very first page. Population dependent growth factor is one that is dependent upon the number of individuals in the population. Examples being disease. Another one's competition. Now, a population independent factor would be something that has nothing to do with the number of individuals in the population. For example, if there's an earthquake, a tsunami, a tornado, a hurricane, a change in the weather, those are all things that are going to happen no matter what the number of people or the number of plants or the number of animals there are in a certain area. They're population independent factors. Now those kind of things are going to impact the population. Now, one of the other things that's going to impact the population has to do with survivorship, and this is on the page 5, and you can see type 1, type 2, and type 3. And the main thing is just being able to read those curves. With trees, for example, again, notice the tremendous die-off very early on. The x-axis there is the percentage into age well, and they live, hundreds of years, in some cases thousands of years. And then humans, of course, they take very good care of their young, and so very few of the young die off. And but then as we get older, into your 70s and 80s and 90s and things like that, people tend to die pretty quickly in those ages. It's the rare individual that goes past the 90s into the hundreds. So again, and this is what we're experiencing with World War II veterans, that they are dying at a fast rate now. Many of them are in their 80s and 90s and more. And so by just a very few years, there won't be very many of them left. I can remember when I was a kid that this was in the 1950s, people talked about there were still some very, very, very few Civil War veterans. And by that time, they were 90s, 100, they're over 100 years old. And so I can remember talking about there. There's just few left here. Oddly enough, one of the interesting little side lines about history there is that the veterans received a pension from the United States government. And during the Depression, of course, that was a very valuable thing. Depression, of course, was in the 1930s. My great grandfather fought in the Civil War, and he received a pension. And when he died, his wife, we call it, I didn't know her, but Daddy called her Ma Witt. She received a pension because of an important thing. And so there would be women out there who in the 1920s or so would find one of these old Civil War veterans, marry him, and then they would be a Civil War veteran widow. And I can remember in the 1960s, even in, I think, 1970s, they're the last one of those died. And so it's kind of interesting how history runs like that. But on page 5, you're not going to have anything on the top there, what we call actuary tables. Those are oftentimes used by insurance companies. But you notice that there is a great deal to do with parental care in this. Now, I know there's not a lot of folks listening. If you folks have a question, this is going to be in the very same format as we saw on the last test that you guys had to turn in on Thursday. I think we're not going to have a live chat, a live stream on Thursday, but we may have one on Tuesday. And I'll try to give you a heads up that that's going to happen. The main thing I'd be talking about on Tuesday would be the final exam. Now, these are the last three things that you have to do, guys. These have nothing to do with your high school grade, but they do have an impact on your college grade. In fact, the final exam counts 20% of your college grade. 20% of your college grade. And so you're going to have to, today, for example, I got one today. I think I got one yesterday as well, talking about the final exam that Cleveland State teachers are giving to their 10, 20 students, which are the same class you're taking, and the final exam that they are giving to them. Now, I'm not, you better be glad I'm not, because they covered some things that we don't cover, okay? And I covered some things that they don't cover. Now, that's what one would call academic freedom on my part. I do tend to follow their schedule, but I do tend to modify what I emphasize and what I teach. And so I think that's fair because I'm the one making the test out. If I was giving their test, then I would try to follow exactly what they're doing, which I'd rather not do that. I'd rather do what I do. So that is going to be coming up next week. And if I do have a live stream, it'll be because of that I give you a little more heads up about that. By that time, I'll probably have a good portion of the test done. It, again, is going to have an answer sheet, and that, I think, will make it a little easier for you to turn it in. Now, it is very important that you have every blank filled, that you have looked everything up on this handout and the plant structure handout. It is very important that you look things up there. That plant structure handout is going to be something that is going to be on your final exam. That's going to be covered on your final exam. Okay. The ecology handout that you've got on biotic is the only thing that's going to be on the test Wednesday evening that you have to get to me by Thursday evening. Okay. So, unless you have any other questions, again, make sure you understand that you have to look through these figures, that you have to be able to read them, which is, I don't think, going to be a bad thing. But I think you should be able to read them, which I think all of you can do. Now, this is a short one. I don't see any sense in beating this over the head. If I had you in class, I'd probably give you a series of questions and you would answer, which I much prefer to do. I can see your faces and I can see what you're doing. I can see when Caden and Michaela are totally lost, when your mind is wandering, and I'd much rather see those kinds of things instead of just looking at my image here on this thing here. So I'm going to end. This has been a unique experience. We'll see if we have one Tuesday. We're not going to have one Thursday. I hope you do well on the test. Guys, you've got to take your time and look things up on these tests, and do answer all the questions. Every test I've done, the last couple of tests I've done like this, there have been people, not just one person, multiple people, that simply don't answer a question. So I'm gonna be very, very candid here. If you don't answer the question, you don't take your time, it's going to hurt your grade, especially when you get to the final exam. Remember, final exam counts 20% of your grade. 20% of your grade. And don't trust the idea that you are getting exactly the same grade that you got in high school. Okay? I think you already saw in the first semester there can be some differences. Depending, you just completely blow these last two tests, yeah, it's going to hurt you. There's no question it's going to hurt you. It may drop you a letter grade or more. So just don't slack off on me here. You got really this plant structure handout you got to get done and submit to me. You got to get this test done on ecology biotic. You got to get the final exam done, and then you're done. That's it. So if there are no questions, and I don't see any coming up, I'll wish you a good night. We'll see you.